I discovered an alien species that haunts our dreams, and they're called the Inheritors. I never should have opened that door. I can still feel the chill that crept up my spine. I was just checking my emails, a normal evening, when I stumbled onto something peculiar. An article about dreams, about a creeping presence that people claimed invaded their sleep. The Inheritors, they called them. My heart raced. I should have stopped there. But curiosity pulled me in. The air was thick with anticipation. My room grew darker. Whispers tickled my ears. I should have turned on the light. The shadows danced around me, each one longing to touch, to pull me into their depths. I felt a heaviness settle on my chest. It was suffocating that I leaned closer to my screen, drawn into the images. Faces twisted in terror, eyes wide as if staring at something behind the camera. My breath caught in my throat. These dreams felt too real, too vivid. The Inheritors were not just figments of imagination. They were there, lurking, waiting for me. A strange noise broke my trance, a soft thump behind me. I froze. My heart thundered in my ears. I could feel it. Something wasn't right. Shadows swayed in the corners of my vision. I glanced back at my screen, the stories echoing ominously in my mind, people waking up gasping, nightmares bleeding into reality, figures standing at the foot of their beds. The temperature dropped. My breath turned to vapor. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it did nothing. I felt eyes on me. More noises followed, low whispers, rhythmic clicks, like nails tapping against wood. Every sound heightened my dread. Was it just my imagination? Or were the Inheritors really coming for me? Suddenly, a hard slam echoed through the room. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't the wind. The door I had closed was now wide open. And there, in the darkness beyond, I saw a figure. My blood ran cold. I could barely breathe, barely think. It stood just on the edge of the light, a silhouette creeping closer. Everything tightened: my jaw, my chest, my very soul. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure in the doorway did not move at first, a statue woven from darkness itself. My instinct screamed for me to bolt, to escape into the night where the air, albeit cold, felt more secure than this oppressive room. But something in me remained transfixed, suspended in fear, as if caught in a web spun by an ancient creature. Slowly, a horrific clarity settled in. It was not the darkness that clung to the figure but something far more sinister. It had shape but no distinct features, an amorphous shadow that threatened to swallow the very light that fought against it. I felt the weight of its gaze, an invisible grip tightening around my throat, squeezing the very breath from my lungs. Help! I managed to croak, though the word felt hollow, swallowed by the growing dread. That simple human plea seemed useless against such an entity. It stepped forward, and a gust of icy air surged into the room. I stumbled back, warmth evaporating like the light from the bulb above. The whispers grew louder now, echoing in my mind with fragmentary phrases that clawed at my reason. The children will inherit. You cannot escape. I blinked, and in that second of darkness, everything shifted. I was no longer in my room but in a swirling abyss decorated with the faces I'd seen in the articles, their eyes wide and pleading, mouths gaping as if trying to scream soundlessly. The Inheritors were everywhere, surrounding me like a crowd of shadowy phantoms, their forms shifting, intertwining, unrecognizable yet chillingly familiar. The pulsating ache in my chest throbbed in time with the haunting rhythm of their whispers. Each syllable blended with the sounds of tapping, nails against the floor, echoing from not just the shadows but deep within my own mind, suggesting connection, invading reminiscence. With each heartbeat, each whisper enveloped me further into their nightmarish realm. I knew with a terrible clarity this was more than just a figment of dreams. They were building something, an invitation to join them. Perhaps. There was a sudden, sharp pain in my wrist. I looked down and saw something black and slender trailing from my skin, a shadowy tendril, pulling me deeper into the inviting abyss. Panic surged, and I found strength I never knew I possessed. I ripped my arm free, causing the tendril to flinch back, its grip loosening long enough for me to stumble back onto the cold wooden floor. "Get away from me!" I screamed, summoning whatever fuel was left in my lungs to break the chains of their hold. But the air crackled with ominous laughter, a chorus of mocking voices that sent shivers down my spine. They were aware of my terror, and it only seemed to strengthen their resolve. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the air, the sound of wood splintering. The wall nearest to me buckled and cracked, a fissure running along its surface as though something were pushing from the other side. I scrambled back, my heart hammering in my chest. The oppressive atmosphere grew thicker, every second stretched taut with anticipation, and then silence. A heavy, suffocating stillness enveloped the room, leaving only the pounding of my heart and the gasping breaths that echoed back to me, mocking. I dared to approach the crack in the wall, curiosity battling sheer dread. As I peered through the splintered wood, a pulse of unearthly light flickered within the void, each heartbeat echoed like a war drum, and as I gazed deeper, a pair of glistening eyes met mine, cold, ancient, infinitely dark, with no trace of humanity. They bore into my soul, and in that moment of connection, I felt my very being unravel, memories bleeding away like water through clenched fingers. A jarring laugh broke through the silence, erupting from the other side of the fractured wall, chilling my spine. "You are one of us now," it said, the voice a grotesque distillation of many. My legs turned to lead as horror took hold, and the laughter, like ripples in a pond, twisted back into the voices of the inheritors. In that instant, the room began to twist and warp, the boundaries of reality blurring. I stumbled back as the monstrous visage loomed closer, the crack widening until it swallowed the light, engulfing me in a vortex of shadow. I felt myself pulled forward, a morbid gravity drawing me towards the precipice of knowledge where nightmares and reality intertwined, but just as my foot crossed the threshold, a mighty gasp burst from my body, snapping me back. I crashed against the floor, gasping for air, the room settling back to its oppressive dimness. The laughter faded, but a lingering sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. Then a voice echoed from the shadows once more, soft yet piercing, "You cannot hide from your dreams. They will come for you." And just as I thought I might be free, the door creaked slowly shut, sealing me in once more, the darkness whispering secrets only the inheritors knew. The air in the room was thick and acrid, as if time itself had begun to rot, clinging to my lungs like a heavy fog. Every corner seemed to breathe with malevolence, shadows weaving intricate patterns that danced just out of sight. With a shudder, I pushed myself up from the cold floor, my heart still racing like a caged beast. I glanced back at the door, its edges softened by darkness, now a mere suggestion of an exit. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but my feet felt cemented, bound by an invisible force that hungered for my despair. The whispers twisted hungrily around me, their seductive tones hissing secrets I was desperate not to hear. "Join us, become one with the void," they clamored, punctuating their anthem with the sounds of soft sobbing. I willed myself to stand, my legs trembling under the weight of their promise. What awaited me outside? I felt the pulse of the house around me, each heartbeat echoing with the disquiet of the inheritors. It was then I noticed the floorboards subtly vibrating, a low hum that resonated with my very core, as if the house were alive and listening. Driven by an instinct to investigate, I stumbled toward the farthest corner of the room, my own dread morphing into a disturbing curiosity. There, hidden beneath an old tattered rug, the faint outline of a hidden trapdoor shone through, its edges glistening like a promise of salvation. An assortment of feelings twisted within me: fear, hope, insatiable curiosity, a maelstrom threatening to tear me apart. I knelt, sweat beading on my brow, and grasped the grimy handle. It felt as if the door pressed back against my hand, imbued with an eldritch energy. I pulled, and it creaked open, the sharpness of its sound a whisper drowning in the chorus of disembodied voices. A chill gust escaped, swirling around me like an unwelcome lover, wrapping me in its cold embrace. Beneath lay a staircase, disappearing into a darkness tenebrous beyond comprehension. Each step I took sent a wave of unease crashing over me, the noise of my feet against the old wood looping into the echo of a distant wail. The tendrils of dread reached out from the shadows, curling around my ankles, urging me to turn back, filling my mind with visions of the figures I had seen, their silent screams vividly etched in my memory. As I descended into the void, the walls seemed to breathe, the air swirling thick with the stench of decay and lost dreams. Repressed images welled up within me, my childhood, fragments of laughter buried under time's relentless weight, the faces of those I had loved flickering like dying stars. "Don't forget," a voice whispered, low and beckoning, echoing off the damp stone walls. "They wait for you." A sudden urgency gripped me. It was no longer merely the chilling presence of the Inheritors, I could feel something tangible lurking in the darkness below. My pulse quickened, dread transformed into raw terror as heavy shapes began to form in the shroud of shadows, taking on grotesque outlines. They were not just the voices I had heard but something more, a gathering, an assembly of accumulated nightmares. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the dark, my voice desperate, reverberating off unseen faces. Silence enveloped me. And then I saw them, glowing eyes aligning in a fractured mosaic, an audience waiting for a performance unbeknownst to me. Their collective gaze burned, pressing against my skin, a suffocating heaviness resting on my shoulders. "Your truth will shape our rebirth," one whispered, an eerie mixture of childlike wonder and ancient wisdom hiding within its tone. The others echoed, a symphony of voices melding together, your truth, your truth." Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath me. The trapdoor slammed shut, severing my only line to the world above. Darkness coalesced into shapes, swirling like a tempest. My instinct screamed to run, yet a part of me felt tethered, as if caught in a web woven from the very fabric of my fears. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form humanoid yet distorted, grotesque features illuminated by an otherworldly glow that pulsated with a sinister rhythm, matching the chaotic beat of my heart. I recognized it, the embodiment of every nightmare I had tried to escape. Its mouth twisted into a smile that tore across its face, revealing rows of teeth too sharp, too eager. "Welcome, to the progeny of your own making," it hissed, the walls vibrating with the words, "You will give us everything." And as all at once the voices crescendoed into a cacophony of horrific joy, the abyss below widened, and I felt myself teetering once more on the precipice between reality and the dark unknown. The air grew colder, thick with expectancy, and a primal fear surged within me, paralyzing and electrifying. In that moment, it became clear I was not merely a spectator but a key held captive by the shadows. They were waiting for my answer. And as the figure reached out with hands like clawed shadows, reality shattered around me, my scream lost within the chaos, echoing in a chasm that craved to swallow me whole. The moment the figure lunged, a deafening roar erupted from the darkness. I stumbled back, desperate to escape the gaping maw that threatened to swallow me whole. My heart raced as I scrambled away, but the oppressive shadows seemed to writhe at my feet, eager to entangle me in their cold embrace. "Give us your truth." The entity screeched, its voice a cacophony of anguish and anticipation. I pressed myself against the damp wall, frantically scanning for an escape route that wasn't there. The air thickened, vibrating with the collective resentment of those who remained hidden, but present, a congregation drawing closer. The grotesque figure twisted, and I caught glimpses of the others' faces of sorrow and rage flickering in and out of view, mouths taut with unspoken words. They circled me, their whispers growing into a ceaseless chorus. "You carry the weight of forgotten memories. You are tethered to the torments of your inheritance." Every word tugged at my consciousness, dragging forward buried secrets. I gritted my teeth, willing my thoughts to silence. I could not let them in. But as I focused on holding my ground, the shadows morphed, splintering into myriad forms, each shadow concealing a piece of a story I wanted desperately to forget. I felt pressure building against my temples, memories surfacing like a tide drawn by a celestial pull. Laughter. A garden, vibrant yet tinged with twilight despair. My mother's voice laced with sorrow as she clutched something invisible to the eye. "You cannot escape the legacy of this house," she had warned. "It is ours to reclaim." The landscape around me blurred, my reality bending to the will of the darkness. The figure drew closer, its smile stretching impossibly wide. I could feel the cold aura radiating from it, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat, a dreadful reminder that I was entwined in its design. "Remember," it hissed. "You have what we need. You are the vessel for our salvation." My breath quickened, panic clawing at me. I needed to remember, yet the thought terrified me. What truth lay beneath the surface of my psyche that would awaken these ravenous entities? With trembling hands, I raised them in a futile gesture of defense. "Leave me. You don't own me." In defiance, I plunged into the darkness of my own mind, desperately grasping for clarity. But as I teetered on the brink, fragments of vision tore themselves free, unraveling like ribbons of a gift long buried, their faces stark and haunting, every version reflecting anguish and longing my ancestors, all the lost souls tied to the fabric of the Inheritors. "We are bound," they cried, a wave of voices combining in a mournful cadence. "You are the thread that ties us, break it, and we all perish." "No!" I shouted, wrestling against the tide, but every denial only served to strengthen their grasp. The walls of the staircase began to pulse like a heart, a rhythm syncing with the chorus of restless souls echoing through the stone. Fear tightened around my throat, constricting like a noose. In that moment, despair swept over me. Each doubt, each uncertainty bore down like a weight. The truth floated just out of reach, a shimmering specter of what lay forgotten in the depths of my psyche. "Embrace us," the figure crooned softly, urging me to yield. "Your truth shall set us free." And just then, as I teetered in the balance of choice, a horrifying realization struck me: the trapdoor had opened again, revealing a faint light beckoning from the space above. It was a palpable promise of safety, yet the moment I glanced up, the darkness surged, a tidal wave of despair threatening to cloud out the light. "Flee if you must," the figure warned, its visage contorting, "but know that running will not silence what calls to you." With that, the amalgamation of shadows surged forward, each whisper coiling around my mind, each gaze drawing tighter through layers of strife. As I made my decision, the echoes of my ancestors surged in a final crescendo, a cacophonous warning that filled the very air I breathed. "You will always belong to us," they cried, the pain in their voices intertwining with the feral hunger of the shadows. I could either grasp the flickering light, the last tendril of hope, or surrender to the shadows, unveiling the dark truth that lay dormant in my soul. My heart thrummed in my chest, caught between two crushing realities. I lunged toward the trapdoor as the walls around me began to crack, spirals of darkness twisting into grotesque shapes that opened their mouths into abyssal voids, but just then, the floor beneath me splintered, and the shadows screamed in unified wrath. As one last, desperate cry echoed from my lips, I felt myself being pulled back into the depths of despair. The truth was too powerful to resist. And then it hit me, a high-pitched hum piercing the silence, and something cold and sharp gripped my ankle, dragging me down into the never-ending darkness, where my truths awaited, eager to consume me whole. I fell through the cold embrace of the void, my screams swallowed by an oppressive silence that was thicker than the darkened air of the staircase. It was as if the shadows themselves had risen to greet me, curling around my body like tendrils of smoke, pushing further into my being. Each moment spent in this eternal descent felt like centuries, the darkness drawing out all sense of time until I no longer knew how long I had been falling. When I finally landed, it was on a floor that pulsed as though alive, thrumming with energy born from millions of whispered regrets. I lay among a sea of shifting shadows, each flicker and flinch imbued with the weight of despair. Faint echoes danced on the edge of my hearing, mouths moving but not speaking, a symphony of sorrows woven through the fabric of this otherworldly realm. As I clawed my way to my feet, the sight before me was chilling. The ground shimmered with reflections, not of surfaces, but of souls, my ancestors shifting restlessly, their faces so vivid and full of emotion it felt as though they could reach out and touch me. Each expression spoke of pain, of battles fought and lost, of promises broken long ago. I stumbled back, the world around me vibrating with their collective anguish. "Welcome home, descendant," a voice whispered, different yet familiar, curling around the syllables like a black shroud. It was soft yet filled with a deep resonance that echoed within my very bones. I turned, and there stood the original figure, now draped in a translucent veil of night, revealing flickers of memories trapped within it while the shadows loomed around, drawing ever closer. I backed away, but the weight of the memories pressed upon me. I saw glimpses of my life, nights spent trembling in my childhood bed, the flickering light of a candle illuminating a singular moment when I first glimpsed their shadows dancing just beyond the threshold of my room. "We were always with you," the figure said with a serpentine smile, watching, waiting for the right moment to reclaim you. The spectral forms flitted around me, their mouths moving in silent agony, their eyes bright with fury and pleading. "Your existence is our sustenance," they hummed in unison, a horrifying lullaby threading through the air, merging with the echoes that populated this nightmarish expanse. "Your blood offers us life." "No!" I cried, recoiling as a surge of rage rose within me. "I won't succumb. I won't let you take me." Yet, even as I protested, something was changing. I felt their power entwining with mine, a dark current pulling me deeper into their quagmire. The shadows reacted violently, pulsing with a rage that made the ground beneath me quiver. "You cannot deny your roots," the figure screeched, the sound disintegrating into 100 overlapping cries of fury as gnarled hands reached out through the mist, grasping at my legs, pulling me down the path behind them. With every step back, the shadows clung tighter, fueling the memories that bubbled to the surface. An image of my mother's hollow eyes, warnings falling like autumn leaves while she became the vessel for the same recurring nightmares. "This house will forever bind you," her voice echoed, morphing into the million echoes at my back, "and it will claim what is rightfully its." Panic seized me as I stumbled further, down a passage of writhing dark, steeped in the very essence of anguish that poured from the walls like black ink. I could feel their collective presence growing stronger, suffocating me in a thick fog of despair. "Embrace your legacy," they cried, a wild cacophony swirling around me, "for it is the only path to freedom." But the lights began to flicker above me, faint and ghostly, like distant stars barely piercing through an unyielding night. My instincts urged me toward them, a glimmer of hope amidst the thickening shadows. With every ounce of strength, I darted toward the glow, resistance tearing at me from every side. In my effort to escape, I barreled through a murky wall of shadows, the cries of "You belong to us," growing into a terrifying crescendo around me. Just as I reached the point of respite, a familiar face appeared in the glow, the visage of my mother, twisted in pain, reaching for me across a chasm filled with wailing souls. "Do not leave me," she begged, but as I hesitated, a piercing scream erupted from behind, pulling my gaze back to the chaos. The shadows erupted, twisting and writhing with malevolence, the figure gaining ground toward me with a hand extended, shimmering with dark energy. Then came a rush of cold wind, fierce and biting, sweeping over me, obscuring the radiance ahead. I felt the deep pull to the past, memories and shadows intertwining around me, gripping my throat as if to choke out my final chance of escape. "Join us," the figure hissed. Its voice was a thunderclap, reverberating through the chamber of flailing shadows. "Your choice cannot remain unknown." And in that moment of fatal hesitation, the ground beneath me splintered, fissures tearing through the heart of this abysmal expanse. I could either grasp the fading light of my mother's visage or surrender fully to the grasp of the Inheritors. But as the shadows shifted, filling every crevice around me, the world turned black, and the walls of anguish closed in, leaving only the sensation of falling once more. Then blackness swallowed me whole. I awoke to the sound of whispers, the air around me vibrating with unnerving energy. The ground on which I lay was still pulsing, but the sensation felt different now, as though my own heartbeat throbbed against the remnants of suffering buried in its texture. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, their forms constantly shifting like smoke against the backdrop of a relentless dark. I scrambled to my feet, spinning wildly, fighting the overwhelming urge to succumb to the despair that clung like a damp fog. In the darkness, I began to discern vague shapes, twisted silhouettes that seemed to breathe in sync with the haunting whispers. Each echo carried the weight of unbearable sorrow, slicing through the silence like a knife. I could almost decipher their words, "Release us, be one of us." Their voices grew in intensity until it became a symphony of torment, layered with desperation and rage. I stumbled forward, the flickers of light, the memory of my mother dancing in the recesses of my mind. I had to find her, had to break this cycle before it consumed me entirely. Surrounded by the phantoms of the restless dead, I pushed through the tightening grasp of their reach, my heart pounding in rhythm with the erratic vibrations of the pulsating ground beneath my feet. Ahead, I spotted a faint reddish glow, an otherworldly shimmer that beckoned like a siren in the dark. It seeped through the cracks of an ancient, gnarled door, its surface crawling with something sinister. Was it alive? My instincts screamed that I should stay away, that venturing closer would be akin to gazing into an abyss waiting to devour me whole. But the allure of that glow was undeniable. I felt its promise seeping into my bones, stirring the remnants of courage within. As I stepped closer, I realized the whispers had quieted, replaced by an unsettling stillness that cloaked the air around me. Time seemed to warp, elongating the seconds until they felt like hours. My breath was shallow. I could feel the moisture from the shadows clinging to my skin, chilling me to the bone. With trembling hands, I grasped the ornate doorknob wrought with indistinguishable shapes that resembled the tormented faces I had seen, twisted in unimaginable agony. The moment I touched it, a jolt of icy energy shot through my body, electrifying my senses, awakening something dormant inside me. It was a darker memory, a memory of fear, betrayal, a lifetime spent shackled to the past. The walls around me gravitated closer, the air thickening, constricting like a vice. "Do not open." The voices demanded, 100 souls crying out against the encroaching dread. But the allure of the glow was unspeakable, and I couldn't turn back now. My fingers curled tighter around the knob as I twisted it, the faint creaking of old wood eerily resonating within the vast expanse. The door swung open with a nauseating groan, revealing a chamber awash in that eerie light. The spectral remnants of those who came before me floated, their mouths moving yet again in anguished silence. In the midst of it all, there stood a figure cloaked in a robe woven from despair, an embodiment of the Inheritors. Its eyes pierced mine, shimmering like molten gold, and I felt the weight of my lineage bearing down upon me, forcing my will to retreat. "Ah, the last of the bloodline," it spoke, its voice resonant and resonating with the pulse of the shadows, a harmonious echo that vibrated through my very core. "You have returned to us, willingly or not. The time has come to unveil the truth of your history." Around me, the disembodied faces shifted, revealing their own torment, each of them a part of my lineage, their despair mingling with mine, a dark tapestry woven through generations. "You were meant to inherit our power," the Inheritor continued, the shadows swirling around its form like a tempest. "To face the choice of survival or annihilation." A memory slipped through my mind, a scene from childhood, forgotten until now, my mother standing at the threshold of fear, eyes dark with the weight of a curse. "They will take you too," she had warned, her voice trembling. "You must never reveal your blood." But before I could comprehend the implications, the chamber erupted in chaos. The walls trembled, shaking free the remains of the tormented souls, their cries escalating into a human-like roar. Shadows erupted from the cracks, writhing toward me, and I glimpsed that same serpentine smile reflected in the figure's face. Suddenly, the floor beneath me shattered with a deafening crack, and I was catapulted backward, falling into a sea of darkness once again. The screams crescendoed around me, a cacophony spiraling into a whirlpool of anguish. Just as I summoned the will to fight against the forces pulling me down, a cold, skeletal hand closed around my wrist, dragging me back down into the tempest. Gripped by the vice of the Inheritors, I felt my consciousness fracturing, memories slicing through time like shards of glass. "Face your legacy." The Inheritor's voice roared, a command wrapped in promises of despair and power, drowning out my cries. As everything faded into darkness once more, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face, this time twisted in agony, further than my reach. Was I to follow her into the void? to become the next shadow in their haunting tapestry? And then, the world around me shifted again, and this time I could hear her scream from somewhere deep within the dark, "Find me." But before I could respond, the darkness swallowed my voice, drowning it in an abyss of secrets left unspoken, leaving me hanging on the precipice of despair, gasping for the grip of reality. As the darkness receded like a tide, I found myself once more on solid ground, my body trembling as if I had narrowly escaped a fatal encounter. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very essence of regret was being held together by invisible strings. An overwhelming sense of desolation clawed at my chest, but I struggled to focus what had just happened. My mind scrambled to piece together the fragments of my shattered memory, desperately searching for any hint of my mother. Around me, the chamber was transformed, the walls now weeping with shadows that contorted and expanded, writhing with expressions of anguish. The golden-eyed figure was gone, but the remnants of its presence lingered like a ghostly stench, suffocating and familiar. I moved forward, one hesitant step after another, the floor cold beneath me, each footfall a negotiation between my courage and fear. Suddenly, the whispers returned, sibilant breaths floating on tendrils of darkness. "Find us, save us," they wailed, and I felt the despair pulsating through the air, wrapping around me like barbed wire. The plea was filled with desperation, as though the souls were now awakening from some deep stupor, revived by my presence. Intuitively, I knew these voices belonged to those who had come before me, their fates eternally intertwined with the fate I was beginning to understand. As I ventured deeper, I came upon an altar crudely hewn from stone, adorned with relics of torment, old bones interspersed with tattered remnants of clothing that had once belonged to the lost souls. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. My pulse quickened as I approached, the shadows swirling tighter, almost conspiring against my intrusion. At the center of the altar lay a mirror, its surface clouded and dark, obscured by years of neglect and grime. I hesitated, but the whispers grew frantic, rising into a cacophony that demanded silence. "Look! Look deeper!" they urged, now an echoing chorus. Compelled, I leaned in closer, my breath fogging the glass. As it began to clear, the reflection revealed not just my face, but shifting images, a kaleidoscope of horrors, each a memory I had never known, yet felt achingly familiar. My mother's final moments flickered by, her eyes wide with fear, and then it shifted to scenes of ritualistic gatherings in the very chambers I stood in, cultists draped in hoods, standing in a circle where my ancestors had bent their wills to darkness, seeking power at the cost of their souls. The glass shimmered again, distorting the images as if the past was clawing its way to the surface. "You must understand," the voices cried, their desperation palpable. "You are bound to this legacy, child. Embrace what you are." With trembling hands, I brushed against the mirror's edge, and the moment my fingers made contact, a flash of fire erupted from within. The images exploded outward, and I stumbled back, blinded by a torrent of light that warped reality itself. When the light dimmed, I found myself facing a wall of shadows, their forms solidifying into figures cloaked in the very despair from which I'd fled. "Join us," they whispered as one, their faces mere voids, an unholy sea of lost faces shrouded in darkness. With a deafening rush that echoed through the chamber, they surged forward, a wave of terror crashing over me. Instinctively, I turned to run, but the air shifted, my heart in a vice grip as I was propelled against the mirror. My breath was choked in my throat. The mirror, once a glassy surface, pulsed with a life of its own, drawing me into its depths. I fought against it, clawing at the edges as unseen forces pulled me closer, questioning whether I would ever return to the world outside. Was this the doorway to destruction or rebirth? As my desperation mounted, against all odds, I wrenched myself away and fell back onto the stone floor, gasping, the mirror vibrating behind me. Its surface rippled angrily as if enraged by my defiance, darkened shadows swirling violently around me. Then, from the depths of the mirror, a clawed hand slid out, a grotesque appendage. Reaching for me, capturing not just air but the very essence of my fear. The atmosphere thickened, time seemed to elongate into an unbearable stretch. "Embrace your past." An apparition roared from within the shadows, its voice an unholy symphony that echoed with forgotten promises. I scrambled backward, but it was too late. With one last desperate scream, I felt the icy fingers grip my wrist, pulling me toward the mirror as shards of every anguish past collided within my heart, and all at once, I understood. My ancestors had surrendered themselves to this darkness, and now, it beckoned for me as well. Just as I teetered on the brink of being consumed into the unfolding chaos, I caught a glimpse of my mother, now reformed in the shadows, eyes drowning in tears, mouthing one final word before I slipped. Run. But it was too late. All sense of reality unraveled as the mirror shattered around me, and for the second time that night, I plummeted into a darkness that promised only more horror yet to come. The darkness enveloped me, a soft mantle that muffled my cries and stripped me of my senses, plunging me into an abyss that smelled of mildew and rot. I felt the absent weight of gravity as if the very fabric of reality was torn, and I was left to float in an infinite expanse of nothingness. Just as panic clawed at my throat, I was jerked back into existence, the cold, damp floor of the chamber gripping my body like a lover unrelenting in their embrace that I gasped for breath, the echoes of my mother's warning still ringing in my ears. Run. The word hung above me, a specter that illuminated the encroaching shadows queuing at the edge of my vision. But my limbs felt heavy, drenched in the remnants of my fear, and the walls around me pulsated with a malignant energy. Slowly, I forced myself to rise, my heart racing like a trapped bird. The chamber looked different now, a warped reflection of itself as if I had crossed a threshold into a more pagan realm. The shadows pulsed with an unnerving rhythm, whispering out pathetically incoherent secrets that scuttled along the edges of my insanity. As I lurched to my feet, the cold seeped through me, and I stumbled forward, trying to find the exit. My focus was shattered by a lingering scent of charred flesh, acrid and sharp, and the sensation turned my stomach. I rounded a corner only to be greeted by faces, no, not faces, but half-formed visages pressed against the walls, trapped within grotesque expressions of terror and longing. This was their fate. Those lost souls my kin had sacrificed their existence for some unholy cause, and now their pain reached out for me like ancient roots clawing the earth. "Help us," said a voice, frail and crackling like embers. I turned sharply, my eyes scanning for the source. A hunched figure stood in the shadows, its body barely human beneath layers of rags falling away to reveal gray, mottled skin. Its golden eyes flickered with a memory of my mother's gaze, and I stepped closer, my heart thrumming in my chest. Why? I managed to rasp, the realization that this was an echo of my own blood stirring a torrent of conflicting emotions. Why are you here? It leaned closer, the air thickening with its rancid breath. We are the Inheritors. Bound to this realm. You like us have a choice. But you must hurry, or be consumed eternally. Consumed? My voice trembled. Shadows stirred at the periphery of my vision, coalescing into a shape both ethereal and malicious. Before I could react, the ceiling of the chamber split with a deafening crack, revealing vermilion light pouring forth like blood from an open wound. The air grew hot, fiery tendrils swirling above, and I was struck with visions my ancestors dragging their broken bodies towards this blighted sanctuary, faces twisted in ecstasy as they surrendered themselves to the darkness. No! I yelled, jolted by the realization of their fate echoing in my ears. I want to join you. The hunched figure recoiled, eyes wide with something akin to compassion, or perhaps warning. You must trust in the shadows. They are not all dark. Navigate this cavern of despair, we can help you. Help? I almost spat, but another tremor ripped through the chamber, shaking loose memories that splintered within the rumbling terror. And in that moment, I understood the very darkness around me was alive. It hungered not only for my body but also for my essence, for every buried resentment and unspoken regret. It licked at my ankles like a covetous snake, sending up waves of despair that nearly drowned me. Get away from me. With a primal scream, I turned and bolted down the hall, the shadows groping at my heels, taunting me. The air thickened with voices impatient, demanding, twisted by an intention long forgotten. You cannot escape your fate. They hissed, clawing at the edges of my sanity, urging me to join my ancestors in surrender, as if my very essence would strengthen them. Heart pounding, I flung myself through a doorway that appeared ahead, falling into a new chamber, the air acrid with the scent of decay and the faint, strangled sounds of what could only be the remaining souls of the inheritors. Their cries blended into a haunting melody, beckoning me towards a dilapidated altar that loomed at the center, a monument to despair that I could feel a weight pressing against my back, the presence behind me a tangible foreboding, urging me to turn and face what drew closer. In my mind, I heard my mother's voice again, layered deep within the cacophony. You are their last hope, do not falter. But why would I be their hope when all they offered seemed a descent into more madness? As the darkness surged, a figure materialized before me, tall, regal, its crown of thorns a stark contrast to its charcoal skin. You are to be one of us. Its voice rippled through the chamber like thick smoke, and my heart caught in my throat. As I stood frozen, the others emerged from the shadows, their collective gaze fixated on me, mouths parting in a hungry grin, revealing rows of sharpened teeth glistening with the sins of ages past. Join us, they whispered in unison, echoing as the very walls of the chamber seemed to resonate with the power of their solicitation that I had no choice but to question what joining truly meant as the chamber began to shift and pulse ominously. Just as the first wave of horror washed over me, an all-consuming dread that threatened to drag me down the floor began to fracture beneath my feet. With a final, desperate scream, I felt myself plummet into the chasms below, surrounded by the darkened echoes of the inheritors calling, urging me to embrace my fate. Find us. They howled as I fell, the abyss yawning wide with promises of more darkness yet to come. The fall seemed endless, a disorienting descent through layers of nightmares hardened by time. Just when I thought I would break apart in the twilight of the abyss, something caught me, cradling my body in its icy grip. I landed not softly, but with a sick thud on what felt like a dusty stone floor, sending a jolt through my bones. The darkness in this new chamber was different. Thick and viscous, it settled over me like a shroud, obscuring even the faintest glimmer of light. My breath came in ragged gasps, each inhalation feeling like it pulled me deeper into the void. My surroundings were indistinct, warped shapes just out of focus, yet the presence of the inheritors lingered like a thick fog, tightening around my throat that I forced myself into a sitting position, my heart drumming wildly. Glancing up, my eyes roved until they settled on a shimmering glint off to the side. A door? No, not quite. This was a gateway, an archway adorned with symbols that writhed under the dim glow, feeding off the dread that hung thick in the air. With a shaky resolve, I felt compelled to approach it, to peer further into the depths of whatever lay beyond. As I stepped closer, the symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into images that were disturbingly familiar, faces I had seen before, twisted with anguish, each one belonging to an ancestor I had never met. The inheritors? No, this was far worse. These were victims, silhouettes molded from agony, their very essence drained and hollow. Their mouths moved soundlessly, pleading for release, while their eyes followed me with a haunting, eternal gaze. Please, a voice rasped, thin and feeble, drifting from the archway. You must not pass, you do not belong here, it is all despair. Heart pounding, I hesitated, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. What do you mean? I croaked, clutching my head as another severe tremor rattled the walls around me. Do not listen to them. Another voice cried from behind me. They seek to steal you, to pull you into their suffering. You are still whole, still you. There is power in that. I spun to face the origin of that voice, and from the shadows emerged a figure wrapped in tattered cloth, its features obscured yet somehow comforting. You must resist the inheritors, it urged, a tremor running through its voice like the final notes of a fading melody. They will use you to rejuvenate their curse. Choose instead to defy that which binds you. But how? I pleaded, frustrated by the layers of dread and desperation. They keep coming after me. Before I could finish the thought, a bark of laughter intertwining with a rasp echoed around us, cutting through the air like shattered glass. The creatures, those who had promised me a home in darkness, began materializing from the shadows once more, their skin dark as coal, eyes aglow with a grotesque hunger. They slithered closer, their mouths stretching uncomfortably wide in a semblance of glee. "You cannot run from what you are," a voice intoned, smooth and oily, shimmering with malicious glee. "Join us, become one with your legacy. Embrace the shadows." The figures encircled me, their presence amalgamating into a swirling tapestry of wills. Some tugged compassionately, others hurled accusations. "You have a choice." A phantom of familiarity screamed, pushing against the gnawing fear. One figure, larger than the rest, drew close, its presence knotting my stomach. "You are more than flesh, you are the vessel to break the cycle," it told me, its breath sour and laden with the stink of charred dreams. "Accept what you are destined to be, an inheritor, a conduit for our rebirth." "No!" I shouted instinctively, fighting the crushing weight of despair threatening to turn me inside out. "Let me go." The ground beneath me quaked violently, rending beneath our collective anguished screams and cries for release. Terror surged through my veins. I could not allow them to take me again. I pushed against the throng. One of their skeletal hands grazed my wrist like ice, leaving a trail of fiery anguish. In that instant, it felt as though a fracture splintered in the air, the shadows wailing as I drew on what little defiance sparked within me. Suddenly, the archway behind me erupted with a searing light, illuminating the visages of souls stretched taut against the darkness. Their faces, some reassuring, some tormented, merged into a kaleidoscope of despair. And through it all, I felt an alien pull, a beckoning presence, drawing me closer to the threshold of the gateway. As chaos erupted, my will clashing violently against the tides of darkness, the light surged forward, engulfing me entirely. I was caught between realms, poised on the cusp of something monumental. It was then I knew, either the darkness would consume me wholly, or I would rise as something more, something I could not yet comprehend. Before I had a chance to ponder my next move, the spectral forms lunged, their cries intertwining with my cries, a cacophony of loss and renewal. The light flickered. I would be forced to face who I truly was. "Erase the past," a voice whispered right before I felt the ground pull desperately beneath me, and, all at once, my vision imploded into a void of light. "Join us," the Inheritors sang, harmonizing into an unsettling lullaby that echoed through my bones. "Choose." And as the sound broke, the abyss yawned wide once more, and I felt myself slipping into a reality yet unknown. I woke up, confused and disoriented. I blinked against the glaring light of my bedroom, the familiar contours of my furniture drawing me back to normalcy. The weight of terror still clung to me like a damp cloak, and I shivered uncontrollably, enveloped by an overwhelming sense of disconnection. Was I free from the Inheritors? Had I escaped their grasp? I pulled myself up, bare feet landing on the cold wooden floor. A wave of relief washed over me at the thought that I was back, safe within my own sanctum. The air smelled of familiarity, fresh coffee brewing downstairs, the faint sound of morning news filtering through the walls. It felt comforting, mundane. Yet, the nagging doubt settled in, like the buzzing of persistent flies. The palpable stillness around me echoed the imprint of something dark lingering. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, the device feeling heavier than usual as I unlocked it. In the bright glow of the screen, I scrolled through a litany of unfathomable fears expressed in the remnants of my nightmare. The shadowed faces of my ancestors fused with the tortured cries of the Inheritors. Memories of what transpired clawed at the edges of my sanity, when I noticed it. Among the notifications, an email flagged with an unread message. Curiosity, dangerous as it was, prickled at me. I hesitated, but the initial rush of adrenaline propelled my fingers. The sender was anonymous, the subject line simply stating, "We are waiting for you." Heart racing, I opened the email. The screen flickered, pulsing as though it echoed a heartbeat. There were no words, only grainy images that made my skin crawl. Nightmarish scenes of shadowy figures gathered in a circle, what appeared to be rituals bathed in darkness, and the smothering faces of the Inheritors morphing into a ghastly likeness of my own. Suddenly, I was no longer alone. My thoughts were crowded, mingled with whispers that rose up within my very mind, intertwining with my own voice a cacophony of sound that sent spikes of fear racing through me. "They will come again," they murmured, relentless and sweet. "You cannot run. You are one of us now." In a panic, I threw the phone away, expecting some kind of release as I turned. It crashed against the wall, shattering into pieces. But the relief was momentary. The shadows lingered, swirling at the periphery of my vision, whispering haunting melodies that beckoned me back into the depths. The light in my room flickered, and dread sank deep in my heart. I raced to the window. Dawn had broken, yet the sun had turned crimson, spilling a visceral hue across the sky, as though warning of the horrors yet to come. I closed my eyes, summoning strength, willing myself to dismiss the whispers. Whatever I faced, I had to survive, to break the generational cycle of despair. But as I turned back into the room, I caught sight of an apparition reflected in the fragments of my shattered phone screen. There it was, a face, familiar yet utterly twisted. A figure stepped from the shadows behind me, no longer bound to dream or nightmare, embodying the monstrous essence of the legacy I had tried to flee. "This is not over," it whispered, the intertwining voices of the lost souls my ancestors had become flooding my ears, each one bearing a truth that resonated deep within my core. "We will always be with you. You are no longer alone." And as the realization took root, I felt them, each one coiling around my essence, intertwining forever with my soul. I was the vessel they had chosen, the chosen one who could not evade the heritage bound in shadows. The inheritors were not just in my dreams, they existed within me now, tethering me to my family's torment and curse. The shadows pressed forward, pulling at my very being, promising power and seductive whispers of serenity. As I turned my gaze toward the crimson sky, a dark realization descended upon me. I wasn't just haunted by the inheritors, I had become one with them. With that understanding dawning upon me, the final whispers filled my head in a symphony of loss-laden ecstasy, echoing a message I couldn't deny. You cannot escape. You will never be free. My heart sank as the shadows began to envelop me, while the truth echoed ominously within the confines of my mind, a chilling surge of understanding washing over me like a tide of darkness. This was not the end, it was merely the beginning. And then, as the world melted away, one final thought imprisoned me: I had become the inheritor they desperately sought, a lurking nightmare waiting to rise anew.